This is a great group, and I'm happy to talk with you this morning about this whole idea of certification. I'm going to jump into it because there's a lot to it. I think that you're going to see the need for certification because it's already out there in many areas. This presentation is going to talk about the background. How did we ever get into this certification area? And then I'm going to explain the framework, why it's put together, both for the agencies and the contractors and the contractor companies. So I want to spend a little time so you really understand where this is coming from. Do you realize really our first inspection manual was put together about 1899? This is about the first compilation, and before that they just had notes, how to inspect a job. So this was a publication that came out. And it's somewhat interesting when you look at it because it wasn't just on pavements, it was on sewers and waterworks and all kinds of other things. But this is really the first attempt to really quantify how we should look at a job or how we look at jobs. Things roll forward, and you can kind of think about the interstate era that was started in the 50s, but in 1974, this whole certification concept gained some momentum because AASHTO and Federal Highway got together and they decided they were going to partner and develop this idea of certification. And this is exactly what was in the document. It says a nationally applicable, individualized, job competency-based, non-discriminatory certification system that could be interfaced with education, training, resources, and a variety of personnel systems. That was really the beginning of it all, and so they struck out to come up with some certification. So in 1976, AASHTO endorsed this certification program. And we see it right today. I mean, they come out and you have asphalt technician training, you have concrete technician training, you have soil training, and certification. So it's something that's there. And this little caveat comes into place, and it's even more important today because if you're going to receive federal funding on highway and bridge projects, a quality assurance, quality control program must be in place that ensures that qualified and certified personnel are doing the testing, inspecting of materials on those projects. Now that's a little different, but a lot of our agencies don't really have or don't really require good quality control from our contractors. And some have it, some don't. So what's the goal of this? We think it's important that you need to certify personnel that have demonstrated this ability to give you a good job, to give you a quality job. And this is a simple goal. We talk an awful lot about good designs because you heard it this morning. We talk about using the right materials. You know something? It has no value unless we have good workmanship. That's been one of the biggest problems. You get this when you see a bad job. Everybody is pointing at everybody else, but quite often it's not the materials, and it may not be the design, but it could be other things. It could be selection, it could be those sorts of things, but more than likely it's workmanship. Here's some examples. Has anybody in here ever seen a failed job? Raise your hand. All right, so I don't think I'm talking to inexperienced people that they know what a bad job looks like. And unfortunately, we have far too many. This is a chip seal. Jason went through what you should do, but obviously the person that put this down didn't understand what you should do. Here's a micro. You know, when you see ripples or you see ununiform texture and those sorts of problems, that's a workmanship issue. That's not a design, that's not a material issue. And then we get into crack treatments. Now, this may be partly selection, but you know, when you paint the road with a sealant, that's pretty poor practice. We've got to stop these sorts of things going on, and particularly nowadays when money is short and an agency owner can ill afford to have a bad project because it just turns everything upside down. Your budget is shot. Not to mention, let's talk about reliability and performance. because there's been an awful lot said about how we're going to shoot at targets, meeting our performance targets. And since that money's short, what happens if a job goes bad that you had counted on, a big job, and all of a sudden it puts that big dent in your moving towards those targets in your payment system, your payment condition? So it's extremely important, and that was one of the things that Chris Lubers brought up, that the ETF is working on a number of initiatives because we want to make sure that agencies have the best design specifications, the best material specifications. We're working on the construction guidance documents, and that's a little long story, but that's going to get rolling. But we need to make sure that it's put together properly by the contractors. So moving ahead, what's the value of having certified people? Well, it reflects an achievement. And I know that most of you have an automobile. Would you take it into a garage where the mechanics are not certified in some way, shape, or form? Would you take your taxes into an accountant that wasn't a certified accountant? It goes on and on and on. There's a lot of certifications out there, and we already have them in this industry. Certification for pavement preservation is really important because it establishes credentials. It improves the skills and knowledge. It offers greater recognition from their peers, from your peers, and it really demonstrates a commitment to pavement preservation that we're going to do the best we can do. There's a framework that's established. AASHTO TSP2, your organization here, has identified 3 areas. The oversight panel identified 3 areas that really need some focus. Laboratory accreditation. This is a job that the AASHTO resource, formerly it was AMRL, but the AASHTO resource group goes in and accredits laboratories. That way you know the tests, the mixed designs that are done by these laboratories are done under the strictest standards, and it's very, very important. And then the updated specifications. And the group in there, Gary and Jim, they developed some, along with the committee, they developed microsurfacing and chip seal specifications that are in the AASHTO spec book. And so now agencies can just refer to that provisional spec or that specification through AASHTO. So it's already established. And that's done, through the ETF and a subcommittee on materials, as Chris Luber said. And then we're finally getting into this certification issue. So let's talk about this. It was approved by AASHTO, the TSP2 oversight panel, that we need a certification program for pavement preservation, and it was done April 13th of last year. And because we carry out the AASHTO program, then we will administer this on behalf of AASHTO through the center. The key to certification is twofold. You've got to have the agencies certified, but you need the contractor certified. And just to certify one and not the other doesn't make that chain strong. You need the agency out there that understands what's going on the job. You see, think about this. There are some very good contractors out there, and the good contractors come at a little price. We're in a low bid system, so sometimes, and you know this better than I do, sometimes maybe a contractor gets a low bid that you hope did not. That guy, that contractor has to cut costs to make some money. He has to cut corners, I should say. You're left with the results. You got something that's a mess out there, you got a public relations problem. So that's one of the reasons that the agencies have to be certified, and the consultants, because a lot of consultants are hired by the agency to oversee the job, and it's been my experience that a lot of times they're sitting in the vehicle watching it go down the road, and they have not a clue what they should even look at because they've never seen a micro, they've never seen a chip seal, they have no idea what to monitor. Those are things that we have to kind of think about. And then, of course, the contractors. Certification is granted through an examination. Nobody wants to take an exam. Nobody does. But it's something that raises that bar, and that's exactly what we got to do, is raise the bar, because I think everybody here is here for a purpose, and that is to find out how we can do things better. This is something that I found on these examinations. There's a lot of people that have been in this business for many, many years, and they have a tendency to walk in with a swagger, saying, I can pass that exam because I've been doing this work for 20, 30 years. They walk in with that swagger, and all of a sudden, the results come out, and they did not pass. And that's exactly what is the case. That Jason went through a number of things, Chris went through a number of things, Scott went through a number of things, and there's been a lot of things presented. There's a lot more to this than we ever thought, or most people ever thought. So what we have to do is get educated on how we can make this bar go up, how we can get better. The program, the certification, has nothing to do with pre-qualifications of the contractor. That's pretty much a financial or past performance type of issue. But this is something that just is to raise that bar. The treatments that are currently available for certification, and we're doing them by the treatment, are the slurry systems, which include the micro, the slurry system, polymer modified slurries, chip seals, fog seals, and then the crack treatments. Guess which one has the toughest? Which one do people have the most problem with? Anybody want to take a guess? Crack treatments. That's where the swagger comes in. There's nothing to a crack treatment. We can just come in and pass that exam and we can get it. So it's counterintuitive. That's some stuff that we have to think about. Talk about training. I'm hoping Chico State does training. I'm hoping Long Beach State does training. I'm hoping University of Washington does training. I'm hoping University of Nevada, Reno does training. Because training is something you can't get enough of. But there's also free sources out there for training. It's web-based training. And it's through ISSA. It gets into the details on all of those treatments, and it gets into very good detail that you have hurdle tests and then you have a final exam. Believe it or not, we can actually monitor how that online training works, because we can tell who signed up for it, how long did they spend in the training, did they do well on the exams or the hurdle tests. We found a lot of people come in and said, oh yeah, we went through that web-based training, it was really great. Come to find out, a 90-minute session they spent 5 minutes on. So they never really trained themselves. But these are things that I can tell you and share with you, that if you're really serious about raising the bar, in which we all want to raise the bar, this is some very good training. And then AASHTO, if you're aware that AASHTO has what they call a TC3. It's the old Transportation, I think it was Core Curriculum Council. Well, that is free if you're one of these states that have contributed the money to the program each year. But if you haven't, then there's a cost associated with taking their training. But the ISSA training is very good, it's free. So what is in these certification exams? They all have the same pattern. They start out with project selection. They get into that. This is on the exams. Then they get into the materials, because they all have the unique material properties. Design, the equipment, the construction, and guess what? Quality assurance. What is quality assurance? It's quality control, quality acceptance, and independent verification. 3 parts, and I think most agencies have really hit that hard. But that's something that has to be brought into some of the contracting community, because a quality control plan should be detailed. It should be 3 to 6 pages. It's not enough to say who's going to do the testing and where the testing is going to be done and what kind of tests and the frequency and all this. it's to get in there and actually say, how do you make sure you're getting a good job? And if things go wrong, and oftentimes they do on a job, what are you going to do to correct them? That's the thing. What do you do if things start to go wrong? That should be in the quality control plan. So there's some things, and I'm not going to get into all the detail, but I'll get into a little bit of it later. So what's the benefit to the agency? You're all under the gun. All the owners are under the gun. You've got to produce good quality treatments out there. You're paying taxpayer money, and you don't want to be caught short. And you know, one of the things we found is when you do surveys, why is it that a chip seal in one area, the agency will report we get 2 years of life out of it, and yet another agency will say we're getting 14 years of life? Why are we getting that kind of spread? I mean, I can understand a range, but some of that widespread says that somebody is not very successful. And why is that? So anyway, it will ensure that future investments in preservation treatments will be properly designed, constructed, and that the treatment will perform as intended. And then the certified personnel will really serve as a quasi-technical expert within the agency, because they'll be the go-to person. So the agency needs that help. And who should we, and this is, we're not telling agencies what to do. That's not the point. But these are recommended personnel that should be certified. The senior level, one senior level inspector and designer from each district or region, somebody in headquarters, one of the engineering specialists that are over the pavement preservation program, and any outside consultants that are going to be involved with these preservation jobs. They need training and certification. I want to say it's a voluntary program, just like all of the other AASHTO certifications for asphalt, concrete, soils. I would have to say that I believe most every state I've been to has some sort of certification training for your hot mix techs and your concrete techs and your geotechs. So why not consider moving it up for preservation, because it's got to be a big part of your future programs. The certification, once you take the exam and pass, it's good for 3 years. The examination for agencies is 50 questions. They're multiple choice or true and false. Don't walk in with your swagger on. They're not meant to trick anybody. They're just straightforward questions that you should know. The focus is on the fundamental inspection points. And then to get through this, you have to have a score of 70% or better. So once you pass, and we want people to pass. This is not anything that we're trying to cut the field. We want everybody to pass. But they've got to work to pass. So we would like to take that name of the person that passed and put them into a database. And that database is available for anybody to view. And that way, and they get a card, and it's a non-transferable card they can carry in their wallet or wherever. It's something that they're out on the job and they say, yep, I'm certified. Contractors, a little more intense, but it should be because they're the ones doing the work. International Slurry Surfacing Association, and that's a nonprofit association. They want to see success in their treatments, and these are the list of the treatments, the slurry systems, the chip seals, crack treatments. They want to see success. They have approved this whole process. This is not anything that AASHTO is doing out on a limb by itself. We've got industry backing this whole idea. First, let's start with the contractor, the company itself, because they're the ones ultimately are going to be held accountable. And so the company is really responsible for everything if you think about it. They're responsible for a trained workforce. We're only saying that certain employees need to have certification, but the company should certify the rest. And they have to have a detailed quality control plan. Annual review required, but the employees within the company, we're recommending a company superintendent, company trainer. If it's a bigger company, they have to do in-house training, so we're recommending that there would be somebody within the company that's certified that does the training. the crew foreman on the job, and then the equipment operator that's running the laydown equipment or placement equipment. Now, there can be more than that, but those are the minimum recommendations. Certifications for the employees are 3 years, but the experience to roll forward, and this is something that the industry recommended in this certification process. Company certification should only be awarded to a superintendent if he's got 3 or more years experience, trainer 3 years of experience, crew foreman 2 years, and the equipment operator 2 years. In other words, we don't want somebody that worked at McDonald's last week come out and assume that they're an expert on equipment operations. Then, in order for the company to renew their license or their certification, not license, we want to make sure they do in-house training, and we're not asking for a lot. It's only 4 hours of classroom and 4 hours on the job. That way, the person running the loot or the mop or the squeegee or whatever, at least they've had some in-house training and they know what they're doing. It's not a big burden for the contractor. I would hope the contractors do that now, and I think your good ones do that. A lot of on-the-job training is important. Contractor has to submit his quality control plan. That quality control plan is essentially a one-time effort, because if they put the effort into making a really, really good quality control plan, then they should only have to change the names of the people that are in the crew, potentially where they do the testing, but everything else is pretty much the same, so they can use it. Now, states may have different additional requirements. It's something that they need to know. When we made this transition on the hot mix side, and I want you to think about this, back when the contracting community in hot mix was basically given a recipe and they went out and they did their job. The fact was that when Super Pave and PG binders come into effect, all of a sudden the contractor had to understand and learn how to do the business. There was a big transition in the hot mix field years ago. Now they understand this stuff, they can do the test properly and so forth. So there was that transition for hot mix, and it wasn't that many years ago. It was in early 90s. So we need to take that same effort forth in certification. Quality control testing, I'm going to buzz through this, quality control plan, and the design protocols, and we're hoping that eventually when AASHTO Resource, formerly AMRL, they go through and accredit labs, they go from east to west, and it usually takes several years to make that run from the East Coast to the West Coast, certifying labs as they go. So it's going to take a while to get the laboratories involved. There are already some laboratories that are accredited in the Rocky Mountain West, and hopefully there'll be more accredited, and they'll be accredited for doing the microsurfacing tests, the chip tests, and so forth. So not every accredited lab can do these tests, so you need to kind of check that out. Quality control plan, I'm going to buzz through this. There's different parts on a quality control plan. There should be a preparation phase. Contractor should go out and look at the job before it bids it, because the last thing, and have any of you had a contractor come back and said, you picked the wrong project, but you know, I did the work, but the reason it's going bad is you picked the wrong project. He knew that ahead of time. Why didn't he say that ahead of time and document it with the agency? Startup phase, what about calibration? Are they doing the calibration, the production phase? How often are they going to take those samples and so forth? It gets into a lot of detail. Where are the records going to be maintained? Goes into all of this. And then for the employees, it's pretty typical that the examination is 80 questions. Maybe a little less on crack treatments, but on slurry systems and chip seals, it's for the contractor, it's 80 questions. Indiana DOT did them in-house. They decided they did not want to do the agency exam, so they brought in all of their people, their foremen, their operators, their superintendents from all of the districts. They sat down in one room together, they went through that online training, and they took the examination, the contractor examination. 36 people sat in the room and they went through it all together. Out of the 36 people, 34 passed the contractor examination. If you pay attention, it's not a big deal. But if you walk in with your swagger, you're probably going to be stunned with the results of where the examinations are offered. First of all, they're offered at any one of the partnership meetings. We will offer any one of these certification examinations. We're going to give one today. The ISSA puts together a workshop down in Las Vegas. I guess I better say Clark County. There's usually well over 100 people that take the examination there. And that's a big deal. So that's a lot of contractors, but there's agencies. If you really want to know about these treatments, that's a great place to get training. If we have enough people, we'll come out and administer the exam through the center. And then let's just say that 1 or 2 or 3 or 7 or whatever want to take an exam. The National College Testing Association has developed a consortium of college testing centers. You go in, tell them you want to take the examination. They contact us, or you can contact us. There's a cost to use that because these are proctored locations where there'll be a proctor in the room administering the exams. There's 348 of these centers, the community colleges, universities. Most of them have an area that you can go and take an exam that's fully proctored. What's the cost? It varies. For you to go into some of these, I've seen them as low as $15 to take the examination there, and I've seen them as high as $50, depending on where you go. There's no uniform fee. It just depends on the particular college, university, or community college you're going into. And of course, there's a cost to take the certification exam because there's tremendous overhead with this. And the cost for agencies is $200 per person, good for 3 years, and the cost per contractors and contractor employees and consultants is $325. If you're familiar with certification, that's on the low end of any certification out there. What happens if you get a bad contractor? How do you decertify them? I can share with you, and you know this for a fact, a good contractor can have a bad job. There's nothing wrong with that as long as they make it right. And everybody has a bad day, and sometimes things just fall around a good contractor. But if he comes back and makes it right, no harm, no foul. If the company fails to follow their own detailed quality control plan, which means they're taking shortcuts, that means, and of course the agency has to be certified in order to call them on this. That's grounds for a decertification. Also, if the company is engaged in any kind of fraudulent action or a deliberate misrepresentation, that's also a cause for decertification. We don't think that we're going to see an awful lot of that, at least we hope not, from certified companies.
Hi. So, looking at this from the concrete side, you have treatments that one contractor, let's say a Penhall company, might come in and do full depth repair, partial depth repair, dowel retrofit, grind it, and then seal it. In terms of the certification, at the end of the day, that contractor would need to be certified for each of those treatments in order to be able to go out and say, I'm a certified contractor capable of doing the concrete pavement rehabilitation or preservation work, correct?
This is why we need industry involvement. I mean, I think that sort of question we have to sit down with your association, the concrete industry, and hash this out, because that's important factors. We want certification in the concrete area, but it's not meant to be a hammer. It's meant to ensure that the jobs that are done properly. And so, yeah, those are things that we need to sit down and work out together, with, having the input of AASHTO. I don't have a good answer for you. I think the major types of work, we'd want certification. But for a company that has many, many facets of that work, those are things that maybe we need to create an exam that covers those facets of work under one certification. but those are things we can certainly discuss. Thank you very much.
The preceding video was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found at tsp2.org. That's tsp2.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.